Greetings, fellow mortals. Welcome back to the Parallax Podcast. Live, die, repeat. Do you get to pick your next character? Today, we're plunging into the perplexing case of the Pollock sisters, a story of tragic loss followed by, well, let's just say it raises some interesting questions about what happens when you die. So grab your Ouija board and your existential dread, because we're about to explore whether reincarnation is real or just a really messed up cosmic joke.
Hi, Willow.
Good morning, Karissa. How are you this morning?
Great. I've been up pretty early this morning.
Yeah, I was woken up by, we like to call Ellie, our dog, Squeaky Faucet, because she is kind of weird. And instead of like whimpering or barking to wake us up, she shrieks. So it literally sounds like a squeaky or leaky faucet in the morning. And at 6:30 or so this morning, she decided to start shrieking to tell me that I needed to be out of bed.
First of all, your description of shrieking makes me think she sounds like a banshee, but then you would describe it as a faucet thing. I'm going to need you to record this so I can hear and decide for myself what this sounds like.
I don't know how else to describe it, because it's not a squeak because it's so much louder than like your typical squeak, but it's also not a shriek because she's not screaming. It's something in the middle. This dog is weird, okay? I don't know where that kind of bark comes from. I don't know what breed that comes from, but something in her has created this shriek that she makes in the morning to wake us up.
Yeah, I'm going to need that recording.
I will send it to you and you can tell me what you think it is, and then we will tell our listeners what the consensus is.
All right, so we had to re-record an episode.
Yes.
Because somehow this one was mysteriously kidnapped from our recording.
It was gone. It just disappeared.
Literally
Maybe we'll
disappeared.
do an episode on that.
Yeah, an episode of when your digital files disappear.
It even said it was uploaded too, and then it was just gone.
I remember seeing it because I was going through and renaming everything to make sure the files were like, so I could see them when we're putting them on the podcast feed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like,
Yeah.
and you're like, hey, is it on you? Is it missing on your end? Because I can't see it. I'm like, hold on, pause. It's gone. But here we are. We're back. So we're gonna record this episode, and it was probably because we have more to offer for it.
Yes. I'm hoping that you have forgotten some of the details.
I still remember the basics, but
Cool.
we're going to go ahead and let you start, and then I'm going to add my little spin at the end.
All right. So this story starts with John and Florence Pollock. John was born in 1920 and was raised in the Church of England before later converting to Catholicism. Florence grew up in the Salvation Army and became Catholic when she married Mr. Pollock. At first, John didn't really believe in reincarnation. Again, if he was in Catholicism, that's not really something that they have in their belief system. However, he read about it in a novel at the age of 9, and from that day on, he would pray for a sign of reincarnation from God to prove him right and prove the priests wrong. So he has a personal vendetta against the Catholic priests for not believing in reincarnation. So later on, John and Florence are married, and Florence gave birth to Joanna Pollock in 1946. She was their third child and first daughter, so they had 2 boys before her. When Joanna was around 5 years old, they moved to Hexham in England, and that's where they had their second daughter, Jacqueline. This is also where John and Florence started a grocery and milk business, so both of the girls were mostly raised by their maternal grandmother. Both girls were inseparable right off the bat. Joanna really liked to mother Jacqueline. She liked to kind of take care of her little sister, and her little sister absolutely loved that. They did not have an issue whatsoever with that kind of relationship. Joanna also loved to wear costumes, and she liked to act in little plays that she would make up, and she shared generously. So she's very extroverted. And Joanna was a little bit more introverted. They also both loved to comb people's hair, especially their father, John, which I think is adorable. Interestingly, Joanna, the older sister, had a premonition that she wouldn't live very long, stating to her parents at one point, "I will never be a lady." Yeah,
Sad.
I thought so too. At 3 years old, Jacqueline, the younger sister, fell on a bucket, leaving a scar right over her eye. And I think it's near the bridge of her nose. The writing that I saw spoke about it being near, I think it was like the ridge. I'm assuming that's the bridge of your nose, like near your eyebrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's where that is. She also had a birthmark on the left side of her waist. So those are some defining features of the younger sister. In May of 1957, Joanna, who was 11 years old, and Jacqueline, who was 6 years old at the time, were on the way to church with their friend Arthur when they were tragically struck by an erratic driver. This was an incredibly shocking scene. Warning, this is a little bit of a graphic description, so you can maybe skip ahead if you want. But witnesses reported that the children were backed up against a wall, and when they were struck, their bodies flew into the air like dolls. So it was very traumatic. The driver was a woman who had taken large amounts of aspirin and phenobarbital, and when that did not work to help her complete suicide, she had gotten into the car and thought she could run herself off the road or run into something to end her life, but unfortunately instead she struck these children and they did die immediately. After the death of the girls, Florence tried to avoid thinking about them, whereas John devoted himself entirely to keeping the girls in his mind. On the day of the accident, he reported seeing a vision of the girls in heaven, and he sensed the presence of their spirits in their house in a top room. He would spend a lot of time up there to try to be closer to his daughters. He thought that their deaths were punishment for him praying for a sign of reincarnation. But then again, he also thought that his prayer should be answered when the girls were reborn into the family. So he's fully expecting that they're going to be reborn into his life in some way. Florence, however, did not believe in reincarnation, and John continued to insist that this must happen, they must come back. And I think because Florence was processing her grief in a different way, this caused a major divide between the two, and they almost ended up divorcing over this issue because they could not process their grief in the same way, and I think that was harmful to the both of them.
Yeah.
However, not too long after this incident, Florence fell pregnant again. Both parents were very excited, and it was predicted that they would only have a single baby, as there was no history of twins on either side of their family. But again, this is the 1950s, so this prediction was really just based off of palpation and the doctor listening with a stethoscope. It's not 100% accurate, but still. However, in October 4th, 1958, Florence gave birth to 2 baby girls, one named Jillian and the other one named Jennifer. I believe Jillian was between 5 to 9 minutes older than Jennifer. It was later discovered that they were genetically identical, except Jennifer, the younger one, had a birthmark on her left hip and a birthmark on her forehead in the same spot where her deceased sister Jacqueline had a scar and a birthmark. Now, if you have 2 twins who are genetically identical, this is where you get the identical twins who look exactly the same. So I'm not 100% positive if birthmarks are things that they would both have or not.
Okay. So I have identical twins, which you know that. But birthmarks are said to, that's not a genetic thing for the most part. I think there has been studies that some birthmarks are like a recessive gene or like a hereditary gene, like a marking. But most birthmarks are based on stress and different things that happen during the pregnancy that can conform those things.
Interesting. Okay. So it is very possible for her to have these birthmarks, but it was interesting.
Yeah, but it's not a guarantee that that's like
It was interesting, though, that she had it in the same spot as her sister, Jacqueline, which could just be a recessive gene, like you just said. But she also had one
process. If that's in your head, you keep thinking about that marking.
Yes. Yeah. And then she had one right where the scar was on Jacqueline as well when she had fallen and hit the bucket at 3 years old. Jennifer had the birthmark there. But other than these physical similarities, the Pollocks didn't really start noticing anything different until the twins became toddlers. The family had moved to Whitley Bay when the twins were about 3 months old, so they didn't really spend a whole lot of time in Hexham to know that area very well. But not too long after the twins had become toddlers, Florence brought out some toys that used to belong to their deceased sisters, toys that she had stored away until the twins became toddlers because it was too painful for her to see them. And Jillian, the older sister, claimed a doll that had belonged to Joanna, and Jennifer claimed a doll that had belonged to Jacqueline. Both stated that these dolls had come from Santa Claus, as they had been for Jacqueline and Joanna, but neither of them knew that their deceased sisters had been told this. They also apparently didn't know that these two dolls had belonged to their deceased sisters. Jillian also saw a toy clothes wringer, which I didn't know what this was and I had to Google it, but it's literally just a manual crank that presses clothes through these two
My grandma had one.
things. Yeah, I had no idea what that was, but that's, I guess, how you would wring
Wash your-
out, yeah, laundry.
Wash your clothes.
So,
or as they would say in our neck of the woods, when you wash your clothes,
you
you're in a
wash, oh, Lord. I still have people in my family who say wash, and I
I
just
know.
quietly cringe.
I always, and if my
Like,
mom
where's
would,
the R?
if my mom ever says something like, "Well, I washed it," and I was like, "Well, that's probably what's wrong with it. That's probably why it didn't come clean. Is because you put too many things on it. You add that R and the
You put too
O.
many letters.
Letters.
Jillian saw this toy clothes wringer and said, "Oh, there's my toy wringer," and also claimed it was from Santa Claus, which is what Joanna had been told, even though Jillian had never seen this clothes wringer before. These girls also never fought over these toys. They separated them exactly how their deceased sisters had and never had an issue over whose toy was whose. The parents also noted that Jillian, the older twin, and Jennifer, the younger twin, acted the same way that Joanna and Jacqueline had. Jillian liked to mother Jennifer, and she acted a little bit more mature in the same way as Joanna had also mothered Jacqueline. They also displayed similar behaviors as they looked to their maternal grandmother for guidance and love. Even though Florence was no longer working and she was more available to them, they still had a much closer relationship with their maternal grandmother. They also both loved to comb people's hair, especially their father's hair. John continued to insist that they must have been the reincarnation of their deceased sisters, and Florence continued to reject this idea until she overheard the twins recreating their deceased sister's accident. Jillian was holding Jennifer's hand, stating, "The blood is coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you." According to the family, these sisters did not know the details of the death of their deceased sisters. So where they got this information, I'll never know. Another time, Jillian pointed out the birthmark on Jennifer's forehead and said, "That's the mark Jennifer got when she fell on a bucket," which is where the scar was when Jacqueline had fallen on a bucket at 3 years old. This was a story that they apparently did not know about.
And we use the word apparently here because you don't know if the dad's obsession somehow was projected. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to get into that a little bit more towards the end of this, but I say apparently for that reason because this is told from the parents' perspectives. We have no idea 100% for sure if they didn't know. The twins later on in life did claim that they didn't know about this, but I'll get a little bit more into that at a later moment. So Florence had once worn a smock when she was working the milk delivery service, but she had put it away when she stopped work after her two girls had passed away. She put away all of her working stuff, put away other toys, just didn't want to be reminded of that part of her life. When the twins were about 4.5 years old, John wore the smock when he was painting, and Jennifer asked him, "Why are you wearing mommy's coat?" She then became annoyed that Jillian didn't recognize the smock, and John later realized that his younger daughter, Jacqueline, had always been home to see the smock because she was the younger girl who didn't go to school, whereas Jillian had been going to school and never really saw her mom wearing the smock. Then when Jennifer, the younger twin, recognized it and Jillian, the older twin, didn't, he made that connection between the deceased sisters and these two twins. Around this same time is when the family moved back to Hexham. While at Whitley Bay, the twins did seem to remember much of Hexham, and even though they had moved away from it upon 3 years old, once they had returned, they would point out and name landmarks that they had never seen before, such as the school that Jacqueline and Joanna had attended, the Hexham Abbey, and a playground that Jacqueline and Joanna loved to play in. Jillian and Jennifer even knew the way to the playground despite never having visited it before. They were able to go there without any help.
Did these kids ever have imaginary friends?
I don't know. It didn't say. I mean, I would imagine probably. I feel like most kids do, but I didn't see anywhere where I read that they had talked about imaginary friends. But
I didn't have imaginary friends.
oh, well, you're weird.
I feel deprived that my childhood was deprived of an imaginary I probably could have used a few imaginary friends. That'd been great.
Probably could have. See, I had too many imaginary friends. My cousin, well, okay, my cousin who is going to absolutely die laughing when she listens to this, she loves to remind me of the imaginary friends I would have because my cousin, she's about 2.5, 3-ish years older than me, but we've been inseparable ever since we were in diapers.
Mhm.
And apparently, whenever I would go over there when I was still, she was probably closer like 10, 11, and I'm still over here at 9 and 8.
Mhm.
And I would have my imaginary friends and I would tell her about my imaginary friends and I would make her play with my imaginary friends with me that she didn't know anything about. And she loves to tell me about.
She's like, "Wait, am I sitting on one right now?"
Yeah, like she loves to tell me about my imaginary friends. I'm like, this is a part of my life that I'm okay with leaving behind.
Oh my gosh.
Anywho, the twins also had a fear of cars and would have reoccurring nightmares of being hit by a car. When a car engine started in an alleyway, the girls grabbed onto each other, shouting, "The car is coming to get us," which, like, I'll give them. Their sisters did pass away from a car accident, and I
Mhm.
kind of would think that I probably would also have a little bit of a fear of cars anyway. I think it's a healthy fear to have. But this one, I don't know how much is a sign of them being reincarnated because I also feel like the brothers knew how their sisters had passed away. So
Who's to
that
say
one,
the
I
brothers
think,
didn't insert certain things?
yeah.
They were older brothers.
Well,
Brothers are not always the greatest when it comes to, you know, fun and not sharing
yeah.
gruesome details. Maybe they taught the girls some of these things.
Yeah, so I think that specific story, I don't know how much I believe in the sense of, oh, this is a sign of reincarnation. That one, I'm like, I could go either way. It could go just that they've heard enough about their sister to know that they passed away from a car accident. That's more so what I think that one would be. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist and researcher at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, read about the girls in a newspaper, and he went to meet the girls in 1963. He interviewed them at the house and examined them for birthmarks. He would later state that since they were genetically identical, he was unsure how the birthmarks came to be on Jennifer and not Jillian. However, this was again in the 1950s, 1960s. There's a lot more research now
Yeah,
into
genetics was very
those.
infancy then, especially with DNA. It
Yes.
was like just becoming aware of some
Yes.
of these things.
So that I think I didn't end up reading too much into his book simply because I knew that some of the things he would talk about was very outdated when it came to the medical research combined with, this whole idea of reincarnation. He did find some interesting things, such as in the 895 cases that he studied. 35% of the involved participants' birth defects or birthmarks found on the reported reincarnations of individuals were the same as who they were expected to be reincarnations of. I believe it was mostly children. So that's interesting. Now, if they're in a family, I don't really think that that's wildly compelling because just like we recently talked about, there is a possibility that some of these birthmarks or freckles or what have you are just genetic, but I digress.
Mhm.
Ultimately, Dr. Stevenson concluded that out of 42 pairs of twins that he studied, he thought that the Pollocks were one of the 2 pairs of twins that had strong evidence of reincarnation. Interesting. Shortly after the twins turned 5 years old, their memories of their past lives began to fade, and eventually they lost their memories of the accident entirely. Jillian later recalled experiencing visions of herself playing in a sand pit in Wickham, which is where the Pollocks had lived with Joanna before Jacqueline was born, so she did retain that memory. Both of the Pollock parents, Florence and John, claimed that they never spoke of the deceased sisters. However, they were also the only witnesses to the reported behavior of reincarnation. And like we just talked about previously, the girls did have older brothers who most certainly could have influenced their behavior, but there's no concrete claims from the girls or from the parents that the brothers talked about reincarnation or the death of their sisters. There's not really a good idea there of whether or not they really influenced the girls' Plus, they were a good bit older than the twins. I don't know how much time they really spent around the younger sisters. Jillian passed away at the age of 44 in 2004, but Jennifer, the younger twin, survived, and so did her granddaughters. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting in the conversation of reincarnation and John's obsession. His granddaughters described him as a violent, controlling, and manipulative person towards Florence. Joanna, a granddaughter named after Joanna, the deceased sister, claimed that Florence told them reincarnation was a lie. Even towards the end, she never really believed in it. She stated, and I quote, "He is truthfully a narcissistic, gaslighting little man." I love it. I'm like, what a great way to describe somebody. And she said that John was a pathological liar who abused Florence. She also stated that he roped everybody in the family into it. The story was a family secret that future generations weren't told about. Jennifer, however, gave a very different story, stating that he would never make lies up, and what he said was the truth as he believed it. He was a very big spiritualist. Jennifer claimed that John never pushed the twins to say anything about their sisters, stating that they knew nothing about the deceased sisters really until their teenage years.
I feel like sometimes people, it's almost like that Stockholm effect. Like they're not going to speak ill of their father, even if he was.
Yeah.
She would. It's almost like you know that never happened, but deep down you're like, if I admit that this did happen, then that discredits him. Then he'll be disappointed.
Yeah, and also depending on if he really was a narcissistic little man,
Gaslighting little man.
there is a possibility that if he was truly manipulative enough, the girls may have actually believed him.
Mm-hmm.
If they
Yeah.
were abused and manipulated and gaslighted enough, they may have believed what he was saying. They may have actually bought into his obsession because he was just that good at making them believe it. And they just don't remember the truth, whether they choose not to or they just genuinely do not have the memory of how it really was. I think that's a very big possibility. Some people also would later propose that the behavior of the twins, like remembering different aspects of the life of Joanna and Jacqueline, as well as some of their similar behaviors, could have come from something called maternal impression, which is the psychic influence of a mother on her unborn child, as Florence likely thought often about her deceased sisters, which is kind of what you had mentioned before. If you're thinking about XYZ daughter or son, or even parent or grandmother, what have you, you think about them enough, then some of those physical or like the physical attributes as well as behaviors that you like or don't like about this person could end up becoming a part of your unborn child.
And there is an actual study. I should have looked that up, but there is a study, and I think I've discussed this with you before, that there is a new study out where they're saying that when a mother is going through trauma, whether it's mental trauma, physical trauma, whatever a mother is going through, can be like transferred to their unborn child, and then their unborn child will have a lot of physical disabilities or mental disabilities, trouble focusing. They're trying to link that when a child is in utero, that there are certain things that's happening to the mother that can kind of transfigure into the child.
Yeah, because they had a study, I remember reading about it. They had a study with rats where they would expose the first generation to roses. And every single time they were exposed to roses, they would get like a shock or a pinch or something, a negative reinforcement to cause them anxiety or stress over seeing these roses. Several generations down from the parent rats, they had the juvenile rats who did not experience this, had never experienced this in their lives. However, when they would expose these child rats to roses, they would become stressed and anxious, but they'd never seen them before. So this was not a learned behavior. This was a behavior that was genetically passed down from these parents who had been exposed to that negative reinforcement of those roses. So I think it's very interesting. The continuation of this research is going to explain a significant amount of not only mental health issues that we'll finally be able to do something more proactively about, but also some of the different genetic disorders or autoimmune diseases that people get that just pop up. And they're like, well, we don't know if this is genetic or if this just
Mm-hmm.
happens. This will hopefully give us an answer, because I know that some people in my family have been looking into this given specific different family histories, and we've talked a lot about, the possibility of some of these mental health issues and or physical manifestations being something that came from the stress, the trauma, the abuse, what have you, from past generations. This could definitely be the case with these two girls, where they are acting out similarly to these twins simply because even though Florence stated that she tried not to think of them, she was their
There
mother.
ain't no
And
way.
yeah, as a mother, I'm not a
Mhm.
mother. I mean, I'm a mother to my fur babies, but I don't have any children myself. But my mother had a daughter before me, my older sister, who was stillborn. And
Mhm.
I can tell you for sure that my mother never, ever, ever forgot about Scarlett. She always kept that baby in her mind all the time, her whole life. So I sincerely doubt that Florence never thought about her deceased daughters. There's no way. I think that would absolutely.
Fun facts: baby rats are called kittens or pups.
Kittens?
Mm-hmm.
We'll
Kittens
call
or
them
pups.
pups.
Yeah.
We'll call them pups because kittens to me are not rats. Well, I mean, they can look like drowned rats when you have to wash them. Others claim, just like what we were talking about, that the parents may have just looked into the mannerisms of their children too much, or like read into the mannerisms too much, especially John, who has been searching for a sign of reincarnation literally his entire life. So, certain behaviors that the children made that may have seemed just a little bit like their deceased sisters, he may have exaggerated and blown up in his mind as being surefire signs that they were the reincarnations of their deceased sisters, which I think is very, very possible, because it seems like after the two girls had passed away, I think he really, really became obsessed with this idea of reincarnation, specifically because he was probably grieving and hurting by the fact that his daughters had passed away. And this was his desperate attempt to try and understand what had happened, or just
Well, and
deny
he
that it
already
happened.
had beliefs in like he already
Yeah.
had beliefs in reincarnation. So I mean, it's called confirmation bias. So
Hmm.
he was already like kind of biased whether or not there was reincarnation. He's going to start looking for signs that may or may not be there.
Exactly. Yeah. I honestly very much believe that some of the behaviors, at least, were probably things that he had read into too much, or things that he had influenced, whether it be by what he said or how he's acting. Some of the behaviors may have really just been really weird, creepy things.
Hmm.
Like kids do creepy things all the time. I don't know. I think I stand pretty on the fence with this one. There is a lot in here that is compelling if it is not a biased retelling by the parents in the family. But I can also see in many ways how you can break apart the argument, so to speak, and say, well, it could be influenced by the father's obsession. It could have been influenced by, if he really was a manipulative person, he might have just forced everybody to believe in this because he was just hoping to have those daughters back. But again, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting story. And I'm also very interested to see what your thoughts are, not only on this story, but in reincarnation in general, because I know that you know a little more on that side of things. And
Hmm.
I'm interested to know what your side is.
Right. So, for those who are new to listening to the podcast, Willow presents cases, and then I like to flip and give the cultural religious side
Hmm.
because that's my jam. That's what my degrees will be in. And that's what I've studied a lot since I was at a young age. So, that's always been kind of where my brain tends to look is like when I see something, I'm like, yeah, but how does this relate to the spiritual world? Or how does this relate
Hmm.
to religion and other people, what they believe? With the Pollock sisters and the reincarnation, as I was listening to the case, I actually question, is it reincarnation or are these like past life memories type thing?
True.
Yeah, so I mean there is somewhat of a difference, but let's talk about reincarnation. The belief of reincarnation originated really with the Indian cultures of like Hinduism. And then it kind of transpired into Jainism and into Buddhism. And then there's like other cultures that have that, like ancient Greece and like the Norse
Hmm.
traditions. There's the Aboriginal traditions in like Australia and places like that. But a lot of people think reincarnation is an Egyptian thing. And I know we talked
Is
about this when
it?
we originally recorded. I'm sorry.
Is it? Apparently, I forgot that we talked about this when
Yeah,
we
well,
originally
so
recorded.
yeah. Okay, so let's just start off with reincarnation as far as what it is. It is a belief that the soul, after the physical death, after you've biologically died in that part, your new life of your soul kind of goes to this process, like s- um, circular life process, I should say. It's it's like your body is trying to be reborn to get another chance at becoming better, to kind of reestablish better karma, to get
Hmm.
higher to the point where you can essentially just be liberated from it. The nature of these rebirths, like I said, is to kind of get better than your previous life. And then everybody's heard of karma. Karma is
Hmm.
that quality of your actions, good or bad, and some of like not Hinduism. I think it's Buddhism. I'm almost certain it's this part I have to double check, but I'm almost
Hmm.
certain one either Jainism, Buddhism, or Sikhism, because in Hinduism, like those are the main Indian culture religions that
Hmm.
have this type of thing. One of them believes that even having too much good karma is not a great thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
The key is to ultimately be reincarnated to where you can free yourself from these spiritual things. So it's called moksha, and it or some like nirvana. I've heard of the word nirvana. It's your that liberation. You're trying to
Okay.
transcend past the physical world that you learn, and your spirit has now been to this point. Whatever. So you have these traditions of where this circular life process of your life force being reanimated into a physical body to where you can learn. Now, there are key differences between what the Indian cultures believe and what some of the other cultures believe in
Hmm.
the reincarnation per se, because reincarnation really is mainly a Indian culture religion based thing.
Okay.
We have westernized it to a little bit more where it almost blends a little bit of like past lives and reincarnation without the talking about the life cycle and improving the
Hmm.
spirit. Because we've
Hmm.
westernized it, we've kind of lost a little bit of the sacred part of it.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
We're
and that
good at that.
happens a lot when when we westernize things
Yeah.
of the ancient world and we lose
Hmm.
sight of the original sacred parts. But a lot of times people think of and maybe that's just me growing up, I would always hear reincarnation and we see it a lot in Hollywood, especially with the mummy movies. I know that it's
Oh, yes.
yeah, the reincarnation, they're coming back. That's not what the basic life cycle is for Egyptian reincarnation. Egyptian reincarnation, which is different, it's linear versus circular, like so the
Hmm.
afterlife in the Indian culture is like a constant, like it's a revolving door of the spirit world until you hit moksha or nirvana to where you are liberated. Egyptian beliefs though are linear. So this is they don't believe that you come back. That is a key difference. They think that your new life is technically your soul's new life and you need your physical body to be maintained. That's why they mummify
Okay, so that's their idea of reincarnation isn't
the
coming
same.
back, it's being like reborn into the spirit world and
Right.
continuing on within this. Okay, okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, for Egyptians, the afterlife is a one-time journey. It's like into this permanent realm. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fields of reed. This is kind of like
Yes. Hmm.
yes. Okay. So this is their like paradise existence for the spirit. Excuse me. So there's like no concept of returning to Earth. That's not like when we see that in Hollywood. That's not the concept that is the Egyptian beliefs for reincarnation. Essentially,
Okay.
um, it's a continuation in the afterlife. So
Okay.
they need to keep the physical body from dying. Essentially, that's why they
Hmm.
take out the certain organs. You have like the heart stays in the body,
Hmm.
because that kind of your heart is what's weighed. It's almost like your judgment is weighed. But like other parts of the body, like your liver or things like that, are taken and put in those like 4 jars.
Yeah.
You see that, like yeah, and those jars are given to is it the son of Horus, I think? But their like I said, their reincarnation is different. They're not coming back to a physical shell. They're not coming back to their old body. They need their body to remain preserved. That's why they do them on vacation. They need their physical body to be preserved so they can continue their life force on the other side.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it's more that physical body is being preserved to keep the spiritual life going. And then like those containers that you see that are always beautifully decorated with the organs in
Mm-hmm.
them, those are being protected by Horus, so that way they can kind of help that soul
They
in
can
the
continue
afterlife.
to,
So
yeah. Okay.
yeah. So while like the Egyptian beliefs and reincarnation involve like
Mm-hmm.
this continuation of afterlife and this structure and goals or whatever, the Egyptian
Mm-hmm.
beliefs really focus on that journey
Mm-hmm.
in the afterlife, where reincarnation in the Indian religions are a focus on the soul's reincarnation to come back and keep that journey going through new bodies.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, that's
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't know. I didn't know that. I honestly didn't even know that the Egyptian beliefs were considered a form of reincarnation. The way you explain it, it makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't realize that was like another form. If
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense, I didn't. I didn't
Right. So
understand.
we reincarnation is such uh, a trendy word per se,
Yeah.
because we've westernized it. Past life experience. We've even attached
Mhm.
certain psychological studies onto past lives and things like that. But like a couple other religions that I have not super delved deep into in my studies,
Mhm.
but I know a little bit about when I did the world religions classes, and they talk
Mhm.
about some of those things, was like ancient Greece. Like Plato, this is like 6th century. Now, the original written histories, because there were a lot of
Mhm.
oral histories, of
Yeah.
course, prior to written. The Upanishads, those are the original Hindu, this is like 1500, 500 BCE. Those were
Okay.
the original, like, kind of written down philosophies of the basic Hinduism and the
Mhm.
reincarnation. So, fast forward, we get into the 4th and 5th century BCE. You got Plato's work in there. You've got these where he's discussing a lot of the journeys through multiple lives. You have
Mhm.
Celtic
Mhm.
Norse traditions. A lot of people were really fast. I mean, and you told me that you also, read a lot into mythology before.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of these different beliefs of rebirth and returning to the soul's new form, and these are less systematic than like the Hindu traditions. Whereas a lot of we've talked about shamans.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
we talked about the shamans and Ka Yang when we were talking about the Hmong.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes, this is kind of where when you have a lot of these things, that there's the Native American, the Australian,
Mhm.
Aboriginal traditions. These are like the rebirth of a spiritual continuation after
Mhm.
death, not necessarily always that physical one that we always know about in
Mhm.
the Hindu
Mhm.
faith.
So it's like with most other religions that believe in this idea of reincarnation, which is kind of becoming more of a broad term, theirs is a continuation of the journey, whereas Hinduism is a cycle. It's systematic. You're being reincarnated for a specific reason to do a
Hmm.
specific thing for
Hmm.
your spirit, whereas the other beliefs are just this continuation. What do you need to do as you enter into the afterlife to give yourself a good afterlife?
Yeah, like the death is not the beginning. That would kind of almost even parallel a lot with past life stuff that I've thought. When
Hmm.
people talk about past lives, like, oh, this is my past life, sometimes when I'm thinking about that, I'm like, well, that doesn't really think that maybe it's a reincarnation thing for you. Maybe it's a connection to a spirit that's tuning in. Remember
Yeah.
when we were talking about the frequencies of the spirit?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also believe, and this is my personal belief, that sometimes when you're in dream states, we can be at different levels of consciousness.
Hmm.
Sometimes our consciousness can maybe echo or vibrate with the spirit world. And
Hmm.
that's why sometimes I feel like they feel super real, is because we are connecting with a spirit, or we are connecting with something that gives us these memories or kind of tethers them to our mind.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you hear a lot of people, and I'll give my own little personal story. And for this one, you hear a
Story
lot of people,
time.
story time. You hear a lot of people talking about with friends or family members who have passed away, they'll have dreams, or some people talk about they'll have a dream with a specific family member. They'll wake up and then learn that that family member has passed away. My mother passed away when I was 14, which I think I've mentioned in a previous episode. And I'll still have dreams here and there of her. And every single time I have a dream that she's in it, I always remember the dream.
Hmm.
And I'm always catching up with her. We're always like sitting and having a meal or having coffee because she started my obsession with coffee. And we're always talking about what is happening right now. Like what's
Hmm.
happening in my life, what's happening in her life, which I mean, nothing's really ever new, but still, like we're always having that kind of conversation. So it would be interesting to think that this whole time it really has been me sitting down with my mom and being like, all right, well, here's my update. Here's how I'm doing.
Mhm.
Here's what's new. Here's what's going on. And I think too, that also goes along with the people who sit there and say, oh, I had this dream. My grandmother, my grandfather, who whatnot, came and talked to me. We had this whole conversation. I woke up the next morning, learned that they had passed away. That was them saying goodbye. I think there's really something to that, because I would imagine that specific family members who you were extremely close to, I would not be shocked if there was some way that you had this connection with them after
Mhm.
they passed.
And so one of the things when you were presenting this case, because when they had twins and they're like, oh, they act like they're sisters, something that I thought of and I wanted to express was, so I have identical twins and I have one twin that acts a lot alike me when I was
Hmm.
younger, like a lot. And then
Yeah.
the other one, she's a lot like my husband. Does that mean that they're reincarnated versions of us? Obviously not, because we're here. That just
Yeah.
means that there are certain traits that we have that we can. And I can say for a fact, in the womb, these two babies were different. One was always very cooperative and one was not.
One was
One was
cooperative.
always very movie and like kind of moving around. The
Hmm.
other one was just like very like passive. So those are the same personalities on the outside. And there's lots of times when people talk about twins in the womb, that how they acted in the womb is a lot how they act when they come out. That doesn't mean it's a past life or reincarnation, but I
Hmm.
do feel that there is a common element to our personalities that we just haven't unlinked in
Hmm.
genetics that
Hmm.
does get passed down. So
Yeah.
it's not unlikely that these twins got their sisters' personalities because
Hmm.
came from the same parents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes right into what we talked about too, with the whole study with the rats and stuff. The fact that
Mhm.
I think they're starting to discover and learn that there's absolutely such thing as learned behaviors,
Mhm.
but there is also so much evidence of behaviors becoming
Mhm.
genetic, which I was thinking about randomly on the drive to the zoo actually a few days ago, because I was thinking about doing this episode, and it's about an hour, like just under an hour for me to drive out there. And I was sitting there, I was like, we talk about instincts, talk about behaviors that are instincts that animals and even humans just know. We just know that we're supposed to do XYZ. Those are still behaviors. They're called instincts because you didn't have to learn how to do them, but they're still a behavior, which
Mhm.
that in and of itself, I believe, is kind of proof that you can have behaviors that become genetic, that become something that we just inherently
Mhm.
know, do, or act out. So, does that mean that some of these behaviors of these twins, or actually of the deceased sisters, became genetic?
Mhm.
Especially like that fear of the cars. I wonder, obviously now the mother and the father probably are terrified of cars since they just had two girls pass away on
Mhm.
the same day. Does that become genetic? And then they start
Or they may not even realize that they are implementing cautious behavior,
yeah.
into that. But like another on the flip side is we're talking about imaginary friends and the tie into friendship or into the
Hmm.
spirit world. So
Hmm.
who's to say that these two sisters weren't haunting or residing at the house spiritually, to where even often when you're watching any kind of ghost show, they talk about how spirits will reenact, like they keep going in a cycle, like a repeated
Yeah.
cycle. Who's to say that these twins didn't tap into that and see the accident happening, seeing the
Oh,
sisters with
yeah.
those things happening? Who's to say that wasn't being shown to them and they don't remember that? Because often kids talk about seeing ghosts, and then when they get
Hmm.
older, they can't see those things. So
Hmm.
there's all these things that could overlap. Not to
Absolutely.
mention, when you're already preconceived to those things in your mind, you're going to start seeing those things in your kids if you already think that's a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where John's obsession with reincarnation, I believe, definitely had a whole lot to do with what was going on with these two little girls. And I
And you
also
said
think
and you said
it's,
the mom said no, like she did not believe it at
oh no,
all.
she didn't believe it. No.
Yeah.
And from John's point of view, he would sit there and say, oh, she believed in it after XYZ thing happened. And Florence may have had a moment where she was like, that's weird. And that was something that stuck with her. But then again, other people in the family were like, no, she never believed in that. She never did. And that's where I just don't know, because there's enough there for me to say that I think this is a very compelling story. I think there's a lot of different aspects of the story that you could really dive deep into. Just like when you said, who's to say that there aren't spirits there of these two girls who are interacting with the twins? Very, very possible. Absolutely. I could believe that. I mean, you hear stories of parents telling it, talking about how their toddlers say some really creepy things. So I could absolutely believe that there was some kind of interaction between the spirits of these two deceased sisters and these two twins. Is it compelling enough for me to say I think that this could be a case of reincarnation? I don't know. I don't know. I think there's too many other possibilities for us to look into for me to say that this is a case of reincarnation. But I do think that it sparks an interesting conversation on what reincarnation even is, because after hearing your thoughts on it, hearing your side about reincarnation, I'm getting more of an idea that the word reincarnation is like an umbrella term that encompasses
I was
these
literally
different
just
things.
thinking, I was sitting here staring at my notes as you were talking. I was just thinking, as you were talking, I'm like, reincarnation is kind of like one of those $5 words that you have to purchase
Mm-hmm.
and you don't
Yeah.
want to keep using it. But like, I feel like we often do that in westernized civilization. We purchase words from other cultures like reincarnation and adapt them to ourselves, how we want that to implement into our beliefs. Because obviously he was raised in the Church of England, and then, the Catholic stuff. But you want to be able to incorporate reincarnation in there, which is not a Christian belief. But
Exactly.
yeah, but I'm thinking, and I'm sitting here comparing, I'm like, okay, so the westernized version is very selfish. You're coming back to get another chance at your physical body so you can experience the physical, superficial world.
Yes.
Whereas Hinduism and like even the linear afterlife of the other ones, where most of their reincarnation is more of a, and it's not reincarnation is strictly, I feel like, more of a Hindu, Buddhist, Jainism, Sikhism. Like, it's more of those cultures that can kind of grab that word and have more of an eternal meaning, because they either are freeing themselves of the physical world to connect to the eternal world. They don't have to come back into a physical body. Whereas westernized culture has brought it on to stay in the physical world, and I don't think it's as connected to the spiritual ether.
Yeah. I think the westernized version of reincarnation is very much, well, I want to try again, because not in the sense
I was
of
deprived of physical body.
Yes, not in the sense of Hinduism, where it's more so, I think, because I think we talked about this in the spirit episode, how they're trying to do better so that they can liberate themselves to a higher existence. Whereas in the westernized version of reincarnation, it's, well, I didn't get to finish XYZ, so I'm going to come back and finish it. Or I didn't get to experience XYZ, so I'm going to come back and it's very much tied to what you want in the physical life, which I think also has a lot to do with the fact that in westernized culture, it's so much of like, I want to do better and have more. It's like this continuous cycle of I want more, instead of seeing what you already have and being like finding peace in what you have, finding happiness in what you have and who you are, and trying to do better for yourself in this life so that you can, like in some of the different cultures you talked about, you can have an afterlife or have a death with no regrets, where you can say, I was happy and I'm at peace and I did what I could to be better now, so that in my afterlife I can continue to have whatever my goals are for that afterlife.
Plus, in the Hindu teachings and stuff, you don't hear a lot about past life memories. You hear about being reincarnated, but not like, oh, I remember this accident I was in. You don't hear as much about the past life memories as you do more about spiritual
That's
lessons.
true.
Yeah, so there's also that difference of westernized versus Hindu culture when it comes to reincarnation.
It's interesting. This was compelling.
Yes, I definitely think so as well.
This is a good one.
All right, so we really have been having a blast with this podcast, and we hope you're enjoying the episodes. If you have an episode you would like to share with us for an idea, please reach out to us at info@theparallaxpodcast.com, or you can also reach us on our social media, and you can go to theparallaxpodcast.com and you can click on those little icons right there. Follow us and send us a message on those social media platforms.
And of course, you can also always comment below on here or on our social media to tell us what you think, or if you have any ideas, again, that you want us to talk about, just put them in the comments below.
Yeah, or if you have a really cool past life story yourself,
we want to know it.
Don't hesitate to email that. That'd be very interesting. We're just talking about the Pollock case here. We're assessing that one. We're not discrediting anybody's beliefs, but we do want to hear from you and let us know what you think about the episode.
Yes, please. Please do.
Well, until then, mortals, I'm Karissa.
And I am Willow. Goodbye, mortals.
Thanks for listening.